Hi, and welcome to the last and funnest, if that's a word, the best and final, perhaps, getting started with Unity tutorial here on www.unitycookie.com. My name is Gabriel Williams, and in this tutorial we'll be going over creating your first game, and we'll actually be creating possibly the worst driving game ever made, but we will be doing it in right about 10 or 15 minutes, just to really show off the beauty of how quick and easy and fun Unity can be, and put together all that you've been slaving away and watching all those other boring interface and components and whatnot tutorials. We're going to put all that together and go ahead and create a game from scratch 100% in about 15 minutes. And I'm sure once you see it, you'll see all sorts of other things you could do to improve it, make it better, make it a truly fun game. So let's take a quick look and see exactly what this game is going to do here. I can hit the play button up top, of course, and give this game a little playthrough. So in this case, our game, quotes, we can drive around a little, let's say it's a moon rover or something. Use your imagination, lots of imagination, and leave a cool little trail behind ourselves. We've got a spotlight, headlights going on here, lots of other little lights, kind of a neat little or sort of neat little environment, and we can just fly around this and have a bit of fun. So obviously lots of good things could be done to this. We'll look into some of those towards the end of this tutorial. So we'll be creating that. Let's get started. We're gonna trash this and start, like I said, 100% from scratch. Let's save that in case I want to access it later. Alright, so let's create a new scene. So if you're in Unity already, create a new scene. Otherwise, if you're not, of course, just open up Unity and go start a new project entirely. Okay, so we have our new scene all ready to go. I'm going to get started on creating this. So the first thing we'll want to do for this game probably is create the environment that we're going to be racing around in or whatnot. So pretty simple. I'm going to just do everything directly through the game object menu up here and create, say, maybe a plane for our ground, and set this directly at 0, 0, 0. And scale it up. Let's say I'm just going to go ahead and make this 50 by 50 by 50 over here. Always, when you have an exact number, mine is usually easiest just to type directly into the inspector here to change its values. Makes things a lot easier on you. So there is our ground, and maybe we want, like I done before, some sort of mountain things or whatever you might think those were. Again, that was just game object create other, dropped in a cube, and scale that up nice and big. Maybe rotate it around. Aha, we have a mountain. A mountain of sorts. There we go. Great. So, I'll go ahead and create a couple more of those. Move them around a bit. Ooh, too big of a mountain. There we go. So just have fun with yours, creating a few like this. Anything you might want. Could be created with spheres or capsules or anything, of course, if you want. Capsules, that's a hard word. There we go. And maybe one more just in case. Something like that. Okay, so I have my environment here created, all ready to go. So the next thing to do would be to create the car that we're actually going to be driving around on this surface. So that's going to be just a series of small, simple objects, just like the terrain we're creating here. And I'll start by creating the base for it, which I think will be a cube. And I want to set this directly to the center of the map. So again, over here, using the inspector, I'm just typing in 0 for each of the values in the X, Y, and Z location. And then scaling this to something that feels about right. No big deal. Okay, something like that, let's say. Maybe a little wider. Okay. And now I'm going to drop in some wheels. Just like that. Maybe make these big old wheels on this one. That looks about right. And again, totally up to you how you're creating this. There's no exact way it has to be made. It's not going to be extremely pretty no matter what, unless you really go to town on it, which is definitely okay. All right, so we have something shaping up here. I'm going to hold Control and click on each of these to select them. Maybe move them down a bit. And looks like my wheel is sticking through my car, which is definitely a problem. Let's move that out a bit. Okay. Alright, so we have that started pretty well there. And what I'm going to do now is we actually want to move this entire vehicle all as one. So usually the best trick to do that is to create a empty game object. So under the game object menu, go ahead and click create empty. And then we're going to bring that game object, and in my case it's already directly at 0, 0, 0 on its transform. So we'll just make sure it's at the center of our car, and that's why I placed the first rectangle there, of course, and I've been building off of that position this whole time. So now I can select all the parts of my car. So in that case it is the rectangle in the center, oops, yep, and each of the tires, and drop that under that empty game object I created. And let's name that Moon Machine. Sounds good. And now that we have that, you'll see if you click this little arrow here, you can show or hide any of the objects that are inside of this, which is just basically, it's called parenting. So now these are all parented to the Moon Machine here, or a child of the Moon Machine. So we can select the top level Moon Machine right there, and then just move that up and down as we like. Make sure it's just a little bit above the surface. Something like that looks about right. Alright. And now that we have this ready, we'll probably want to create the headlights, and I had a bit of a cool underglow effect going on with the old one. So, of course, through the game object menu, create other, let's create a spotlight. Whoa. And we notice, of course, as soon as you drop in a light, Unity decides to turn off its sort of default lights that it has on when there's no real lights in the scene. If you don't like this look and you want to go back to being able to actually see something, and you've just created a light, you can click on this little tab right here, or button I should say. And now we're back to just seeing the default lights but not any real lights. So that can be handy if you need to just quick set up some items. Now with this light, obviously we want it to rotate and be pointing along the front of our vehicle. So if I go into the rotate mode and then hold Control, I can turn it in exact increments of 15 degrees in this case, and make sure it's lined up so it's pointing straight forward. And then I'll just sort of eyeball it to this, kind of hard to see, and bring it up somewhere around the center of the vehicle as if it's the headlight. And now I probably do want to turn on that light so I can, or light toggle, so I can see how my headlight is affecting the world. Not very well at the moment. Let's turn that off, and then also bring in some sort of actual solar light, like a sun or moonlight that might be coming in here. So under game object, create other directional light. And again, with the directional light, the only thing that matters is the direction in which it points. It does not matter where you place it at all. So we'll do something like that. Maybe bring it down quite a bit, so it's sort of a soft light, and give it maybe a bit of a bluish tint or some such. There we go. Okay, so now we can see a bit more in our level, and we can tweak this headlight a bit more to our liking. Maybe make it a bit of a wider cast and a longer range. something so it'll actually do us a little bit of good here. Oops. Okay. Alright, that feels pretty good. Obviously tweak yours to exactly whatever is working best for you. I'm going to add sort of a light yellowish orangish tone to this here. Okay. Alright, so now we want to add in maybe that sort of cool looking underglow effect to our vehicle, just make it extra sweet. So under the game object, create other point light, and I'm going to just move it underneath my car where I think I might want it. Something like that perhaps, and give it color that looks a little better. Maybe actually a bright orange. And I definitely don't want it to affect that far out. And right here we're now seeing something that will come up for you certainly, in that you can see, especially as you scroll out, and if we turn this textured up here to texture plus wire, that our light is actually only affecting per vertex on this plane. That's because Unity is going, oh no, there's too many lights, it's going to hurt performance. So we can force it to look a lot prettier if we select that light and go over here and change the render mode and put that on important. And now it's going to render as a much prettier light. We can set that to actually the exact size we want. Oops. If I can get that working. There we go. Something like that. And I'll actually do the same with my spotlight just to make sure it works okay. Render mode important. Alright. The directional light, we'll leave that alone. It doesn't need to be in the important mode at all. Okay, so we have that set up. Looks like we got a pretty good vehicle going on there. Let me just move my sun out of the way so I can see this here. Now, if we move this, once again, the lights obviously don't stick with it, so we want to bring those into this Moon Machine group. We can do that just as before by simply grabbing or selecting on the point light in the hierarchy here, dragging it right up and onto the Moon Machine group, and then do the same with our spotlight. And now if we select that Moon Machine, they all move together. So there we have that, and then the last thing we want to do is set up our camera so that it's going to follow this our little Jeep thingy around, and we will do that by let's see, just simply setting it up so it looks pretty good. Something like this. Guess I need to rotate this. There we go. And just sort of find a place where I feel it's a good camera position for this. I'm going to go with something like that. Okay, and then once more we'll drag that right onto the Moon Machine group, so it's parented to it. Alright, so we've got this about ready, and we did actually forget one thing. We're going to drop in that neat looking little particle trail we had going on there. So again, through this game object menu, just like everything else, we're going to go create and then particle system. And particle systems are really cool in Unity, very easy to use, very fun to use especially, and can make some very neat effects without being really hard on the computer or anything like that. You can use quite a few of them and do some neat stuff. So a particle system is just a series of really very small objects like this that look like more than they really are. So we can use them to simulate things like, in this case, maybe dust flying out from behind the vehicle as we move, or anything, maybe smoke or some such. So I'm going to position this right about towards the back of the vehicle, and then I want it to appear like, or as if it's not there until we start moving. So I need to hide these particles within that the back of that vehicle. And we'll do that using the ellipsoid option over here. So if you select your particle system and then look down along the ellipse in the inspector, inside of its options here, you'll find the ellipsoid. If you only see this, don't worry, just like with the group here, you can simply click that little arrow and it will show you the other options that are within there. So it has an option for X, Y, and Z, and this is just where the particles initially appear in the X, Y, and Z. It's random anywhere inside that. So if I'm looking directly at this, I want it to appear, say on the Y, no more than maybe, looks like about half of what it's doing right now. So I'm going to put the Y to 0.5. And we see it updating there. And the Z, actually I think going in this direction, the blue arrow, is okay. But the X, of course, I don't want it to be moving in this direction at all, only when we move. So I'm going to set the X to 0. Oops, 0. There we go. Okay, and it's updated itself. So there we have it. You can kind of see a little bit sticking out here every once in a while, but I don't think it's really bad. It should work for our purposes. And we'll move it right about up to the back, just enough there. Okay, so now we have our vehicle, and we can sort of test this out by selecting the top level of this, moving it back and forth. Oops, once again, need to parent that particle system to it, to the group. And now when we move it, leaving a nice little trail behind the vehicle as it moves. Okay, so we have that all ready to go, and the last thing to do really is make this actually move within the game. So for this, of course, we have to create a new script. And you can see I have my original script up here, but we're going to just ignore that and, like I said, rewrite this entirely from scratch just to try and show how easy it is really to make this work. So we're going to go create and then a new JavaScript within your project folder over here, project pane, sorry. And we'll call this, let's say, new control script. And once you have that ready, you can just double click to open it. And we're given the good old function update, and not much else to start with. So the first thing we know is we'll need this to turn left and right and move forward and back. And we'll probably want some variables to control that so we can, within the editor, sort of tweak exactly the speed and performance of this vehicle. So I'm going to create two variables, one for forward speed, and call this var forward speed. And I'm going to tell Unity this is going to be a float, so a floating number. So it could be anything from, well, any number really. It's just that it doesn't have to be a whole number, so it can be 1.23875 or some such, not just 1, 2, 3, 4. So float, and then equals, and we'll say maybe 3. Just we'll start with that. And then variable turn speed, again a float, equals maybe 2. And of course we'll be tweaking these numbers later on to make sure we get just what we want. And now we're going to make this, this little guy actually turn and move. So within the function update, of course, every update, we need to go and check if the user is pushing the arrow keys, and if they are, apply a forward force to move the car forward, or turn the vehicle either left or right depending on which arrow key is pressed. So we can do that a couple of ways. Probably the cleanest is to create yet another set of variables which will hold exactly the amount of force we're turning or pushing the car with. So let's go variable, maybe forward move amount. And of course the names you actually use don't matter at all. It's just you know, whatever works best, so you can understand what you're coding later on is important. One thing actually, while we're at it there, you can always comment your code so you remember exactly what's happening. Say just put 2 slashes, forward slashes, and then say this is the forward speed that will actually happen, or some other probably better explanation of it. And then put those, the more comments the better, really. I've found a lot of times when I go back and read my own code I cannot remember what the heck I was doing, and it can be tough to figure it out, so comments are good. So forward move amount, and forward move amount is going to be based on the up and down arrow keys, so we can get those by using input dot get oops, sorry, not get button, get axis, and that is the vertical axis, as in pushing up and down, vertical. So input.get axis. So Unity is going to get whether or not it's pushing, someone is pushing on those arrow keys, and they're always either or anywhere between 0 and 1, or I'm sorry, 1 and -1, -1 being going backwards and 1 being upwards or forwards. So we'll get that vertical axis, and we're going to multiply that by the forward speed, just like so. And I'm sorry, this colon should actually be in equals, of course. It's a little larger. Alright, so we now have our forward movement amount, and we need a turn amount. So we'll go var turn amount equals input still dot get axis, and this is on the horizontal now. So horizontal being, of course, left or right arrow keys. Oops, there we go. And we'll multiply that by the turn speed. And comment that perhaps. So actual turn amount. And now we want to actually turn and move the vehicle using those amounts that we just created. So we can do, as in a previous tutorial, if you remember, transform. So we want to access the transform directly. Oops, if I could spell here. Dot rotate. So we're just going to rotate the root of this vehicle. And just like everything else, in this sort of case, it's a x, y, and then z amount. And we don't want to rotate it, or we can look here and see actually. If we select the vehicle, we see we have x going this direction, z going this direction, and y going upward. So we want to rotate around as if this is these are sort of pivots or pillars. So the one we want to rotate around, of course, here is the y. So it's going to turn in this direction. But you can also see how this is there's a lot of lines going on in there. If you scroll up, you can see how this green line here is showing that's your y rotation, and that's how we want to turn it. So then we know y should be turn amount, and x, of course, is 0, and z is 0. Okay, so we'll just give this a test to make sure our script is working so far. It's usually a good thing to do, I find, before anything gets too complicated. Test it out and see what is broken, if anything. So it looks like no errors are coming up after we saved it and re-entered Unity. So we'll go ahead and just grab that new control script, and if you have the vehicle selected, you can just drag it right down and onto its inspector panel here, and now it'll be ready to affect it. So let's hit play, and just using your left and right arrow keys, aha, it's working. So I'm always so a little surprised as I go when things work on the first try. Again, I'm a bit of a learning and working from scratch type guy, so hey, when it works, I'm happy. So we're good to go on the turn. Now we just need to work on actually moving this vehicle forward. So like I said, we're going to move this using force instead of directly turning it. Usually it works a little better, so he won't drive right through mountains or anything. There'll be an actual force doing this. So, oops, sorry. So we need to just add an actual rigid body to this vehicle, so it becomes something that's a real physics object here. So we do that again by of course, select your Moon Machine object first, and then go to Component, Physics, Rigid Body. And now we have a full Unity physics object composed of all of these various parts here. So that should be set and good to go. And now we can access this rigid body just like we did the transform directly from the script. So let's comment this here. Rotate the vehicle. Oopsies. Vehicle. And This one will be push the vehicle forward with a force. Alright, so again, we're accessing the rigid body component of this. So just as simple as transform.rotate rigid body dot, and we're going to use the add relative force command. So this will add a force in this vehicle's own direction, and once more, it's in the X, Y, or Z directions we're adding it. So let's go back to our vehicle and see exactly which direction we really want to send that force. So if we hit W or click on the move, we can see the direction of our vehicle currently is actually backwards on the X. And sometimes you run into issues like this where you might have, you're like, oh shoot, I forgot to, set up the the spotlight on the wrong side or something like that. No biggies. You could either select everything in here and rotate it around, or I guess you would actually, to be honest, want to just move the spotlight to the other side so we keep our X going in the right direction. Or we can just sort of roll with this and say, hey, okay, backwards X is the direction we want to go. So that's fine. We will say to go backwards, simply make it negative, so negative, and then we have the forward move amount. You can double click on a name like this and then hit Control C to make it easier, so less typing. Control V to paste that in. And then we don't want this to move it on the Z, the Y or the Z at all, of course. So now this will move it backwards, this amount, in this direction. So, just like that. In theory, we hit save, and let's give this a test play right here. So now, we're hitting the up and down key, but nothing exactly is happening. Let's find out why here. I believe it's because we're just not applying enough force. So now we can go in and within your script, just go ahead and change forward speed to something like, let's try 50 and see what happens. Oopsies. Keep hitting Control S to save, just by pure force of habit. Don't forget, just as I keep doing there by accident, save often just in case. You never know when Unity might crash or somebody might come by and crash your computer. You never know. Always good to have it saved. Less frustration in the end for sure. So we're upping that forward speed to about 50. Let's hit play. And now, there we go, moving around. So we might notice that he drifts a lot. You can tell it's still moving even after I let go of the controls. This is something that, as always, we'll definitely be getting more into in some future tutorials, along with this little issue here. But what we'll do for now is just show you some quick and easy ways to tweak that so it will run a little better for you. In the rigid body component of your Moon Machine, you can change a few key things. The mass is how heavy that object is, so it's going to react very realistically because it's of course the NVIDIA physics. And we have drag, angular drag, use gravity. Use gravity, just like it sounds, turn that off. If something hits it or forces it from the bottom, it'll float right off our little world here. So it's generally good to have that on, in this case at least. Again, mass is weight. Drag is what we want to make this not slide around so much. It's going to slow it down as it moves, just like in real life. Drag will slow anything down as it's moving through the air. So we'll try something like 0.75, and then angular drag so it won't twist and turn too much. Maybe 0.5 just in case. And we also want to keep it from, if you notice when we hit that block the other time, it flopped over, which we really don't want happening here because we don't have the controls to keep that from happening. So we can cheat a bit and just freeze the rotation so it can no longer rotate on the X or the Z. And now it can only rotate in the direction we want, of course, on that Y pivot. X and Z, we don't want it to rotate, so we freeze X and Y right there under constraints. And now let's try hitting play, see what we have. So we have still okay movement, and he comes to a stop much better. There we go. And if we run right into this sucker, pow, no crazy flipping upside down. Alright, so here we have our game playing around. We're definitely over a 10 or 15 minute time, but I'm sure you'll find if you do this once again yourself and you already know it all, and it's not a matter of looking and checking where the keys are and exactly what you're setting up, it can go by much quicker, and it only gets faster the more you do it, especially with the scripting. Great thing to keep learning, and again, we'll definitely have more tutorials coming out on this sort of thing. So go ahead, go crazy with this, and try making it look a lot better than what I have here for sure. And maybe we'll revisit this in the future and make it a real game for you. So thanks for watching, and look forward to seeing you in the future tutorials.